Good evening. Welcome. Let's go ahead and get started. It is my pleasure to introduce our speakers tonight. Wife and husband team of Kendra and Jim Tierney. Kendra attended the University of Southern California. You can move now. Where she earned 2 bachelor's degrees in both English and comparative literature. She was also a Division I athlete, so she had to excel in 2 different sports, in both track and field and cross country, and she was the USC Scholar Athlete of the Year at USC. Then she went on to her career as a civilian flight instructor, but she found having a single job boring, so she went on to hold 4 jobs, which she currently holds. She's a mom of a family, soon to be 10 children. She's a blogger with followers in the tens of thousands. She's an author of books on Catholic home culture and children's stories and prayers and so on. If you look up her name on Amazon, you have to scroll several screens to get all the books she's published. And she runs a home school for kids, getting them ready for the best school in the whole wide world, which is St. Monica Academy. And she's also, just this year, inaugurated what is going to be an annual convention for Catholic moms from around the country. And my wife and I were back in Virginia talking to some of the people who married into her family, and some of whom have also converted to the Catholic faith, as Julia did. And they were talking about coming out to California for this convention being hosted and led by this amazing woman named Kendra Tierney. And we said, well, we know her, and then they ended up staying in our house and attending that convention. Well, not to be outdone, Kendra married a wonderful man named Jim Tierney, and Jim graduated from Harvard in 1996, where he played football as a lineman. Then he was an artillery officer in the United States Marine Corps for 5 years. He went to a mediocre business school called Stanford, and now he is the chief executive officer of an amazing business called Exer Urgent Care. It's E-X-E-R. I hate to say this because I don't want other people starting to go to it, because you'll make the lines long. But you get in quick, you see a real doctor, and you get what you need. It's unlike hospital emergency rooms. It's unlike other urgent cares. It really is, and the business is booming and sprouting everywhere. So thank you, Jim, from all of us for that. I'm delighted that he's now on the board of directors of St. Monica Academy, bringing great his business skills and wisdom and the toughness of a Marine officer to that. He's also started something called the Dad Project. It's a series of podcasts on fatherhood that a couple of people in this room have also contributed episodes to. It's really excellent, so I urge anybody to check that out. And a lot of us follow his blog called Fortitudine, which is an amazingly inspiring story of the cheerful courage with which he and his family are facing the stage 4 cancer that he's battling. So let's all pray for Jim and his family and give him a big, warm St. Monica Academy welcome.
Thank you, Martin, for that kind introduction. We have one microphone between the 2 of us tonight, so we're going to pass it back and forth, so bear with us.
All right, so good evening, everyone, and thank you so much for coming. Tonight we're going to share a little bit of our family's journeys, and specifically how through trial and error we have landed on our own views regarding parental authority.
So we will cover the why parenting with authority is important. And then we'll get into the how in these 2 sections. And we'll close it out with some thoughts on our duty as parents. Okay, so why do we, I'm getting used to a new laptop here, I haven't used this one before. Excuse me. All right. Okay, so let's start with the why. So why do we exercise authority as parents? Well, that is the way that God planned it for us. Authority is the right to be obeyed. It is the power and also the responsibility to choose and to decide. And we know that God has that right. So, as with any good thing in the supernatural realm, we see it reflected in the natural world as well. So, for example, marital love is a reflection of God's own love for each of us. And in an analogous way, parental authority is a reflection of the authority of God that God has over his creatures. So why did God design it this way? Well, he wants all of us to come home to him in heaven to be happy. And so the confident, consistent guidance that parents can give their children is really the best assurance of that. So the world is going to exercise authority over our children in some way or another. And the world will give our children discipline whether we do or not. And so we believe that we have to love our children enough to exercise that just God-given authority to guide them, to shape them, help them shape their character and their consciences. The alternative is that they'll struggle to overcome that childish self-centeredness that we're all familiar with in order to be able to actually serve others. They'll very likely have trouble relating to other figures that have rightful authority, such as teachers, employers, the law, maybe even God himself. And so now don't worry, we're going to equip you with some ideas in this talk that hopefully you can walk away from here with and be prepared to take on that great responsibility of exercising this authority.
All right, so here's the why of parental authority articulated by St. Ambrose, that great collaborator, dare I say co-conspirator, of our own patroness, St. Monica, in the conversion of a childish and immature soul. St. Ambrose says, that man is rightly called a king who makes his own body an obedient subject, and by governing himself with suitable rigor, refuses to let his passions breed rebellion in his soul, for he exercises a kind of royal power over himself. And because he knows how to rule his own person as a king, so too does he sit as its judge. He will not let himself be imprisoned by sin or thrown headlong into wickedness.
Okay. So, why don't we now, when we go into the how of parenting with authority, and I thought that it might be fun for a few minutes to test out a character I've been working on. That is a guy who doesn't really get parenting with authority. And I thought that maybe you could just, be your regular brilliant self.
Sounds like a plan.
Right.
All right, so for our parenting with authority talk and concept, we have one rule. The one rule is always mean what you say. That's it. That is the entire foundation for parenting with authority. So really, we could just kind of end the talk right there and see if anybody has any questions. Yes, you have a question?
I have a question. What if I am big on empty threats.
So actually, empty threats would be a good example of not always meaning what you say. So I can't really support that. But how about if we go into some scenarios in which always meaning what you say is useful?
Well, okay, I'm not sure I want to give up on the empty threats. I think if I keep making them, as the kids get older, they'll listen more. And by the time they're teenagers, the empty threat, it's like a barrage of empty threats, will become what you might call an effective parenting tool.
All right, well, why don't we put a pin in that and maybe just talk through some of these scenarios.
All right, so there's the 3 scenarios.
All right, so always meaning what you say is effective for lots of different parts of a parent's life. Like, for instance, if you'd like your kids to be contributing members of your household, if you want them to be able to do chores and serve the family, things like, say, loading and unloading the dishwasher.
Oh, absolutely. I think that by the time kids are 16, 17, maybe 18, they should definitely know where the dishwasher is and be able to locate the start button and be able to press it after I load it for them.
All right, so what if by always meaning what you say, you could get them to say when they're 3 or 4, begin loading and unloading the dishwasher, and by the time they're 6 or 7, be able to manage doing the whole thing themselves?
See, I don't think that's feasible given the amount of time it takes me to cook a different dinner for each kid. So, I mean, Wahlberg only eats hot dogs and grilled to very specific standards. Aniston only eats butter noodles, and they better be al dente. And McCartney only eats Cinnamon Toast Crunch. And well, also, ever since we saw that mom in the grocery store pouring the sugar packets in her 4-year-old's Pepsi, now I have to do that too.
All right. There's a lot there, but we'll move on. We'll move on to the next one. Let's say something like physical safety. That always meaning what you say can have an effect on the physical safety of our kids. Like, if, say, we want them to not run into parking lots, especially when you're too pregnant to chase them down.
All right, well, part of this doesn't apply to me. But of course, I don't want them to run into a parking lot, but that's kind of an unrealistic goal, am I right? I mean, the safety products industry has pretty definitively declared that this is not possible and instructed me to purchase one of those kid leashes. And I'm nothing if not a guy who obeys corporate marketing.
All right, well, I support that general inclination towards obedience, but maybe we can direct it in a different way. And I want to point out that always meaning what you say is useful for parents of different temperaments and for all different parenting styles. Because you get to choose the things that you say things about when you mean what you say. And you don't have to say things about the things that you don't care about. So if you're more of a let them eat with their hands off the table type of family,
that's my house. I feel that I've succeeded as a parent if I've kept them alive for another day. If we've changed out of our pajamas for the day, and if they didn't eat their meals off of the floor.
Okay, so that's great. So now you've identified some things that you might want to mean what you say about. And then the other things, you could just leave off for now and maybe work towards some other goals in the future. All right, so that's the one rule. And let's hear it for Jim for his fantastic portrayal
Okay. So why don't we dive deeper into the how by running through what you might call the Decalogue, or the Ten Commandments of always meaning what you say. And that should show you how this can work in action in family life.
So I will add here before we get into the specifics. So the beautiful thing about the one rule, about always meaning what you say, is that it applies not only to all types of parents and all types of parenting styles, but also all ages and types of kids. You know your kids best, and kids with special needs are always going to require special implementation, but always meaning what you say is going to create trust between parent and child. It's going to create an environment of security where kids aren't wondering what's allowed that day, or if mom and dad happen to mean what they're saying this time around, or if they don't. And it's a question of just starting from wherever we are, and understanding that we can decide that we want to do things differently, that we want to do things better. And we can have high expectations of ourselves and our children, and we don't have to resign ourselves to the chaos that our current society believes is the normal state of family life. It doesn't have to be that way, and it really is just one rule: always mean what you say. But let's go a little bit deeper into what that means in various situations. So the first rule, or the first sub-rule, is always mean what you say, and when you say it's time to leave the park, it actually is time to leave the park. So always meaning what I say means being trustworthy. It means that we mean it even when it's not exactly what our kids want to hear at that moment. If we say it's time to leave the park, but then don't leave because our kids throw a fit, or they come and they didn't hear us, then our kids learn that we do not always mean what we say. And if they learn that, then they're going to ignore us, and they're going to argue with us. And I do not care for being ignored or argued with.
It's true.
Okay, number two, always mean what you say and never lie to them. So, as an example, and to continue with Kendra's story of leaving the park, we do not play the game of pretending to leave. This isn't dealing with the kids truthfully. So we don't resort to trying to coax reluctant toddlers by saying, okay, you can stay, but I'm leaving, and then I do the cartoon fake walking away. We don't do that. You know who doesn't believe that lie? Anybody. Nobody, including the child, who figures out that all the empty threats are just empty threats. Nobody believes that I'm going to make this sociopathic decision to abandon a toddler at the park in order to make a point. So it's just not true. He doesn't believe it. And maybe you've seen the rest of the story play out. So as a last-ditch effort to stay at the playground, the toddler says, or maybe shrieks, "I want a cracker!" And now, to go off on a tangent for a second, we don't leave this situation uncorrected. So kids don't get to declare "I want" in our family. So we're always constantly reminding them, do you have a polite question you'd like to ask? So anyway, back to the scenario. The toddler wants a cracker, and the beleaguered dad gives in because he guesses, probably incorrectly, that the distraction of the cracker is the way to get the toddler to leave the playground. But then the toddler wants more crackers. And you might have seen this happen at some point after all the back and forth. The dad needs to get down to the business of actually leaving the playground, and he wraps up the crackers and stashes them under the stroller and says, "No, we're leaving, they're all gone." You know who doesn't believe that lie? Anybody, including the child who saw that there are more crackers. So a better way to approach a situation like this, a more truthful way, is to say something like, "I'm sorry, sweetheart, Mommy loves us, and she's making a wonderful dinner for us at home, and we're not going to spoil it with more crackers. And it's okay to be a little hungry, you won't starve, and hunger is the best sauce, and so you're going to really enjoy dinner when you get home."
All right, and now we move on to number 3, which is always mean what you say and get up when necessary. So if we told him not to and he still is, we're going to have to get up. And this is admittedly a lot of work at the beginning, but it's definitely worth it. So if he's not allowed to throw toys and he's throwing toys, I need to get up and take those things away. And if I told him to put the Legos in the bin and he's not putting the Legos in the bin, then I need to get up and motivate him in some way to make that happen. And yes, it is super annoying. And once I have found a moment to sit down, the last thing I want to do is get up and tend to things that are not happening as they should. But it's really worth it. The more consistent we are and the earlier we begin to be really consistent, the easier the job is. And we get this concept well ingrained in a toddler before the next baby comes along, because it's really better to not start the process when you're nursing a newborn, because the toddler is definitely going to call your bluff on that. So I'm not going to get up and wake up a sleeping baby.
Yeah, and by the way, this is a picture of me as a baby asleep on my dad. And so this might be a situation where it is not necessary to get up, because we have a rule in our house that you don't wake up a sleeping baby.
Right, it might be like someone setting something on fire with off stream. I would recommend getting up. Because that's against our family rules.
Okay. Number 4, always mean what you say, even if they are sad, mad, or loud. Who would take a picture of your child?
This is Frankie, so there have been lots of opportunities.
Okay, here's the scenario to illustrate this one. So I take my sunglasses back from the baby, and I say, no, these belong to Daddy, and then the baby starts shrieking. And then I quickly give the sunglasses back to the baby and say, okay, shh, you can have that. And so the baby thinks, really? That's all I have to do? Shriek? Want something? That will not be a problem. And so we are very careful not to train our kids to be sad, mad, or loud in order to get things.
We don't negotiate with terrorists. All right, so rule number 5 is always mean what you say, but obstinance is not a virtue. So when I say something to my kids, when I ask them something, when I tell them to do something, the answer should be, okay, Mama, 90% of the time. Now, maybe 10% of the time, they're actually going to have new information that might change my mind about what I said or asked. And if they do have that new information, we can definitely change our minds, and that is not the same thing as not meaning what you say. That is assessing and reassessing the situation. And so we're always sure to be really clear about why we're changing our minds, and to point out that the change was only possible because the child presented his case calmly and without crying. I have a personal policy against changing my mind when my kids are whiny, even if they are also right.
That's also a true story. Okay, number 6, always mean what you say and have rules and keep them. So establish rules in the family. They create comfort and clarity in the home. Because without them, everything is up for discussion. Everything. And by discussion, I mean whining and pastoring about every little thing. So for instance, in our house, our kids are allowed to play the Wii under the following conditions. If they're done with their schoolwork, they're done with their chores, they're done with their practices like music practices, or if they have a session with theater or something, that someone has agreed to play with them. So we have a buddy system for all technology in our house. So we don't want use of technology to be isolating, so that's a rule someone has to be with you. And then lastly, it's dark, raining, or over 100 degrees, or it's a Sunday. So it's a very restrictive set of rules. But when kids come to us and they say, can I play on the Wii? We can say, I don't know, can you? Tick off the things that you've finished and accomplished in order that you can tell yourself whether you've met the standard for playing on a video game system in our family.
Right, and so there's not surprises and there's not that motivation to argue and feel, and grasp for something that you think might be just outside your reach. It's either possible or it's not based on these standard rules that we adhere to. All right, and rule number 7, always mean what you say, but you don't have to be a believer. So I married a Marine. My kids understand the concept of following orders immediately and without question. However, in practice, they respond much, much better to let's gather up all the library books and get going because the library closes early today than they do to stop reading that and put it in his bag. So it's easy to confuse parenting with authority with authoritarian parenting, which is really a different feel and not what we found to be effective in our house. So I used to think that parental authority meant that I would just say something one time, my kids would rush and do it. That's not necessarily the case. There's a lot of explaining, and there's a lot of there are explanations as to why we're doing it, why it's important that we do it, why we have to do it this way. And within reason, I'm okay with that, because I think that that's a way to treat them with the kind of respect that I want to be treated by them. So we give reminders and we give explanations, but we still expect compliance in the end, and pretty quickly. But it's not that just what I say goes without an explanation of why. And inconsistent doesn't mean being unpleasant. And yelling isn't going to be effective if I don't mean it. And if I do mean it, I'm probably not going to have to yell much. I have yet to perfect no yelling at all, but that's all we can.
Okay. Number 8, always mean what you say and give clear consequences and then follow through with them. So we don't say to our kids, if you leave your clothes on the bathroom floor one more time, I'm going to pile them in the front yard and light them on fire. Since probably we won't do that. We do say, if you kick the counter again, you will stand for the rest of lunch. And then we follow through if necessary. We can be calm and be firm and not get mad and just mean what we say. So for excellent advice on particularly effective consequences, we like a book called Discipline That Lasts a Lifetime by Dr. Ray Guarendi. He's a Catholic radio show host. And Dr. Ray really focuses on the concept of consequences for kids. And it's a very funny and charming book. By the way, this photo is from our wall of family rules. A lot of you have seen it. And it has a good reminder of consequences on it. It has one of these tiles that says, what does God do to complainers? He sends snakes to bite them.
It's in and they were complaining about food, by the way, when he sent snakes to bite them. All right. Rule number 9, always mean what you say don't have a crystal ball. So we don't ever get pressured into promising something that we can't necessarily deliver. We don't make promises about anything in the future, be it what they're going to have for a snack when they wake up, or whether they can do a particular craft after their schoolwork is done, because we don't know the future. It's part and parcel with the not lying to them and leaving the part when I say I'm going to, I want to be trustworthy, and if I'm promising them things in the future, I can't necessarily deliver on that. Say I tell my kids we can do a craft as soon as we've all finished our math homework, and then it takes them so long to finish that Jesus comes back. I would hate for my kids' last earthly thought to be, hey, she said we could make Play-Doh. All right, and I will take a quick moment here to say that always meaning what you say doesn't mean that life doesn't sometimes get in the way. Plans do change, and kids need to be able to learn to handle disappointment and to control their emotions. We never promise to make things up to them or say that they can go next time for sure, because again, we don't know what next time is going to look like. In fact, we never say I promise to them at all. It's right there on the Sermon on the Mount. Jesus says, but I say to you, do not swear at all, either by heaven, for it is the throne of God, or by the earth, for it is his footstool, or by Jerusalem, for it is the city of the great King. And do not swear by your head, for you cannot make one hair white or black. Let your word be yes, yes, or no, no. Anything more than this comes from the evil one. And I happen to think we'll see, we'll see. Is that okay too?
Okay. Always mean what you say, convinced that the resistance is futile. So this is a picture of our daughter Mary Jane resisting her passport photo, but still having to take her passport photo because resistance is futile.
And the great thing is this is actually the picture.
So there's this story that kind of gets repeated around on school playgrounds and in lunchrooms that I don't know if it's really true, but they say that if you put two aggressive fish in a tank and you separate them by a clear barrier, that they'll attempt to attack each other over and over again until they realize that it's futile to try to get through the barrier, and then they'll stop, and then you can remove the barrier, and they'll never cross over into the other side of the tank again. They'll realize that it's futile, and they'll have been trained, so I don't know if it's true, but I think that this is kind of like the goal of parenting with authority. If sometimes we mean what we say, but mostly we give in, especially we give in if they're sad or mad or loud. All we do is teach them that being sad or mad or loud is the way to accomplish things. So we force them to be unhappy so that they can get the things that they think they want. But if being sad is never an effective way to get what you want, and children realize pretty quickly that they might as well be happy or at least not throw a tantrum. So none of us wants to be people whose kids listen to their teachers and their coaches and their tutors, but they won't listen to us. Because we're not people who always mean what we say. Okay, so let's close out with a few thoughts on our duty as parents.
All right, so we've got a quote from Pope Pius XII here. It says, parental authority must be tempered with loving kindness and patient encouragement. To temper authority with kindness is to triumph in the struggle which belongs to your duty as parents. All those who would advantageously rule over others must, as an essential element, first dominate themselves, their passions, their impressions. Sounds really easy.
Is that easy, just that hard?
From the guy who doesn't have kids.
So in many circumstances in life, and maybe most clearly in our work lives, authority is actually something that people have to earn. But in parenting, as we said, it's given to us by God. And that doesn't mean that we can be self-satisfied at having received that gift. God has entrusted precious souls to us, and I believe it's incumbent on each of us to earn anew every day that privilege of exercising that authority. How do we do that? Well, by building ourselves up in virtue. Being someone that our kids see as a virtue subject matter expert, as a moral authority. Someone who's so practiced in virtue that our kids see it in us and then want to emulate it. The alternative is to be seen as a hypocrite by our children. So where do we start on this life of virtue? Well, as I believe we've heard in a few other of these talks in this series, building virtue in the home and achieving really any good ends in family life starts with loving and serving our spouse and being on the same page with them. And that's a rock-solid foundation for parental authority. So with that, we can conclude our talk, and we'll be happy to take any questions that you have. Thank you. Mrs. Ball.
I have a question. What is your policy on bribing? I think I know the answer to that, but then how do you distinguish bribing from rewards for good behavior?
All right, so the question is, what's our policy on bribing, and how do we differentiate between bribes and rewards for good behavior? So I would say that a lot depends on how you present it to the kids, to like how you sell it. If you say like, no, come on, get in the car and you can have this sucker, like probably that's just gonna make your life more complicated. But we do systems a couple of times a year called the bean jar, and it is kind of a bribe system, but it ends up feeling like just a way to reward sacrifice and virtue. So during Advent and during Lent, we have these systems where kids get a reward for if we see them doing a good deed or just saying, okay, mama, right away when we ask them to do something. Then during Advent, they get to put a piece of straw in baby Jesus' manger, and during Lent, they get to put a bean in the bean jar, and it's just putting a piece of yarn in a box, and yet it's somehow motivational to even my teenagers, because you do like to occasionally be rewarded, recognized for good behavior. But I think that we definitely do work towards goals. We recognize, we single out individual kids who've been really pulling more than their fair share, and Jim will take them out for ice cream or something. But more in a sort of performance review feel, at that point.
Yeah, I think that what I'm hearing in Kendra's answer, and what I would have said is, the way that I distinguish bribing and rewarding is that rewarding is for the demonstration of virtue, and bribing is for compliance with some, demand and so we do try to. I think that the bean jar and the straw and the manger are they require the demonstration of virtue, a personal sacrifice, a kind service for another member of the family, and so I view those as rewards as opposed to bribes, and we kind of try to stay away from, if you comply with this, then I will give you this. That doesn't happen. I don't think. I can't think of that happening in our family system.
And just as a follow-up though, because what if you do have that 2-year-old or that 3-year-old who just won't get in the minivan when it's time to be somewhere at a certain time, and you've got your handful of the newborn over here and the canvas bag over there, and you're like, come on, and then he won't do it. I think it's get up. I think the answer is whatever number that was, but still, that's hard. That's hard, and it takes time.
So the question is what do you do with a toddler who refuses to get in the car when you say get in the car? And that is, you have your hands full with baby and groceries and whatever. And yes, there's not in our system, there's not a quick fix for that. It's an established pattern of behavior. It's teaching them that even if they don't want to go to the car, they have to. And if I have to put the baby down over here and pick you up and put you in the car, I think that this is in Dr. Ray's book, he talks about that then the rest of the day you just remind them, no, I'm sorry, we're not going to be able to watch a show today. Remember how you didn't get in the car when I asked you to get in the car. And no, I'm sorry, there's not going to be any dessert after dinner tonight. Because remember when we were going to get in the car and you didn't want to get in the car, but I'm sure you're going to do a better job of it tomorrow. And then, and then we'll be able to, then we'll be able to have dessert. And just that reminder and that expectation that I'm going to say to I'm going to say to my 3-year-old, go to the car and get yourself buckled in, and I'm going to expect that to happen. And that in our house is powerful. That I expect her to comply with it, and she can see that. It's not 100%, but yeah, it's just starting with smaller things, lower stakes things, like don't try it out the first time, like in a busy parking lot. All right. Yes, Mrs. Alex.
So what if you have one or multiple children who are particularly argumentative, like their makeup is they're just gonna fight because they like it. They like to fight. And it doesn't matter, even if you are extremely consistent and make them follow through and get up and force them and put them and all these things and you explain to them, it's almost like they like to butt heads, So does that end at any point?
What to do with a child who is naturally really argumentative and naturally non-compliant. And I think that we definitely have experienced that as parents. Many of you have experienced that as teachers of our children. But I would say that I always begin, my goal is to always begin by respectfully listening to what they have to say. And as soon as I determine that it's just nonsense, it's not helping anybody, I just say no. That is not useful information for this situation, and I need you to do what I said. Nothing that you're saying right now changes what I said, and I need you to do it. And there are definitely going to be times when it's a great time to have a debate, talk around the dinner table, try to encourage that in a more positive situation, but whether or not we're going to put the library books in the bag and go to the library now, the library's going to close, and so if you don't have new information to add to the situation, I don't have time for this conversation right now. That's kind of how I handle it.
Yeah, they'll probably be good at something, right? They say that the world needs lawyers, right? And so, that's directed at the lawyer section.
I find it problematic just that they would argue with, after I've made something clear or,
Yeah, so, and so the question is, should we take offense at them even?
Yeah.
The idea that they would argue against parental authority. So, one thing I'll say is that this situation used to bother us a lot more among the early kids in our arc of kids that were particularly argumentative. And what we spent a lot of time doing was praying for the strength to harness this child's forces for good, not evil. And persistent, and just renewing our own will that we are going to do that we are going to, that we are the parents that God picked for this one. And not only that, that this child is a child that God picked for us. Somehow, that we needed a child that was, for whatever reason, is, is as we say in the Marines, is a sea lawyer at the age of 4, and who has to argue everything. And just having that beacon that we are going to make this child into something great. If we can harness that argumentativeness into something that's good down the road. So we're not trying to we're not trying to brainwash that out of them. Sometimes we can put up with it, sometimes we can't. But maybe there's virtue that can be turned into down the road.
And the other thing that brings me comfort in dealing with the more strong-willed, more obstinate kids is how much you can see that those qualities are great things to have in an adult. They're great things to have in a high schooler, where they're going to listen to what you say and then decide if they feel like complying based on their preferences and what they think is right. And of course, I think that it requires pointing out to them what they're doing, saying, this appears to me to be you just being argumentative again, and this is something that we need to do, so let's just stop arguing and let's do it. But the flip side of it to me is, we have had kids that are obstinate, and we've had kids that are really naturally compliant. And as challenging as it can be to parent a really strong-willed child, always meaning what you say is really effective with those kids. And they do come to understand and respect, and we think they have come to understand and respect our authority, and that I would actually argue that it's easier in a lot of ways to parent, to rein in the obstinate and strong-willed children than it is to get our more meek and mild-mannered kids out of their comfort zone. And we were actually in San Diego with our oldest two, and I was by the side of the pool trying to think of anything I could. Well, we would have had more than two, but there's a 4-year-old and a 5.5-year-old. And the 4-year-old, I'm trying to convince to jump just off the side of the pool and onto the little step. Nothing doing, not interested in jumping off into the side of the pool at all. Meanwhile, the 5.5-year-old has climbed up a ladder that was just leaning against the side of the wall, climbed onto the roof, and is planning to jump off the roof of the house in the pool. But two things happening at exactly the same time. And I realized it's actually a lot easier for me to say to him, no, do not jump off that roof. Get back down. And because I meant what I said, he climbed back down, did not jump off the roof. But that's an easier parenting challenge to conquer for me than to, I'm not going to just take my 4-year-old and throw her into the deep end. That's not really my style. And so that takes, in a lot of ways, the weaker children take a lot of time and effort that just isn't as recognizable.
Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Quackenbush.
Could you share a little bit about what consequences you use? So you talked about playing the long game and say, you mean what you say, you make it happen in the moment, and then you remind the kid kind of over the course of the day. That's kind of a longer term consequence. But what do you do for consequences in the moment? And then related to that, what if it's something particularly serious? Is there any role of how do you communicate the difference between minor infractions and maybe more serious issues?
All right, so the question is, what exactly do we use for consequences? And I would say that the consequences that different parents are comfortable using vary greatly. We have been comfortable using on little kids, hand spanking is, I find, really effective. It's quick, you can do it discreetly. It doesn't require, especially for younger kids, keeping them in a timeout often escalates the situation just more and more and more. And especially with like a child between the ages of 1 and 2, if I say stop kicking that, and then he continues kicking that, and then I say if you kick that again, you're going to get a hand spanking, and then he kicks it again, and I give him a hand spanking, then that's a really quick and easy way to reinforce the fact that I mean what I say and that you can't kick. Whereas, other more, it's harder to make that connection between if mom says I can't kick and then I kick, now I have to sit over here. It's just not as easy for a child to put together. Now, I do think that people definitely can parent effectively without spanking if they don't feel that is correct. But especially for littler kids, it's just been such an effective way to set the foundation for I mean this, and you have to stop. And I happen to think that it fits in with sort of the way that God designed our bodies, that it's not a good idea for me to eat a whole pie, so it hurts if I eat a whole pie. And so, in the same way, like, it's not a good idea for you to do this, and if you don't listen to me, that's what's going to happen. So that's what we do for younger kids. For older ones, we do have a timeout. I put them in a timeout in the crib so that they can't climb out again, because they don't want to get in a battle of wills trying to keep a kid on a step or a chair or something. So I put them someplace they can't get out. And then, as they get older, it's when we have a book of George Washington's rules of decency and civility and decent behavior that Frankie has worked his way through a good 3/4 of this school year. Yeah, they copy out the rules, which there are some really great ones about like not picking lice on yourself in public and not warming your hands over meat that's cooking. Really stuff that's really going to be useful for the long term.
Just a couple things. So the timeouts in the crib goes along with a rule. So to go back to what we say and have rules and follow through with them, we have a rule in the family that's crying babies go to bed. And so if you're just weeping uncontrollably, if you're and this is our tantrum killer actually. So crying babies go to bed. You just go in your crib, you can't get out of it, and we explain to them.
Crying babies go to bed does not apply to babies, it applies to toddlers.
Yeah. Yeah, and so, it's a rule that they know because we repeat frequently, and it's different than go to your room where there's interesting stuff to play with as soon as mom walks away to go cook dinner. It's different than sitting on a step you can run away from, you're just sort of trapped there. So we found that to be very effective. And then, with older kids, consequences usually involves those things that they want to earn. Our family operates on a lot of a system of earning privileges. So most things that you might want to do that are beyond the basic needs of life are privileges in our house, and you have to earn into them. And it just becomes pretty clear what matters most to each kid, and being able to take that away as a consequence for bad behavior is something that we found is pretty effective. Those things change over time, their preferences with their age change over time, but we found that taking away the things that matter to them is a pretty effective consequence when they're beyond the time and age.
Yeah, it's really almost complete. It's almost the entire reason that I have a Wii in the house. Like, that we have a video game system in the house. it's great as a consequence.
I have a two-part question. How do you deal with sibling disputes? If you guys have any, and two, do you believe in allowance?
Okay, sibling dispute, how do we handle sibling disputes and allowance? So, sibling disputes, yeah, no, our kids always get along. Okay, so, the number one thing, in one of the rules, we should pull up the one of the rules. But yeah, one of our rules is we actually have a few rules that have to do with this. One is, could you make our baby happy? So if the dispute is with a baby or young toddler, then I expect the older kid to, even if the older kid is 3, I expect her to give the baby whatever the baby wants, which is going to be a problem at some point. I stop having new babies to replace the old babies. So far, how can you make our baby happy up there in the corner means that if the dispute is with someone significantly younger than you, then that person is. Another one of our family rules is if a toy causes unhappiness, it goes away. So I have absolutely zero interest in listening to a long story about who had what first, or like whose turn it was, or who wants it more. Like if a toy is causing unhappiness in our home, I'm just going to take it away and I'm going to put it on a shelf in my closet, and when I remember it, I will give it back to you. So it's really, what I want is to motivate them to work things out between themselves, but also we have, let's see, unless it's dangerous or destructive, it's just tattling, but that means that if it is dangerous or destructive, I want to know about it. And so we have sort of a general family strategy of team kid and team grown up, and we want our kids to be on team kid. And we want them to look out for each other, and we want them to, to have each other's best interests at heart, because they're going to have each other in their lives, hopefully a lot longer than they have us. And so we want them to be on Team Kid and come to us only if it's dangerous or destructive. Now, it's not a perfect system, but yeah, that is our hope, to create that kind of camaraderie where they want to look out for each other and they don't want the other one to get in trouble. And then allowance, yeah.
So we don't have allowances in our house, and I've been to a lot of talks, and I think there are valid arguments on either side of this. People believe that an allowance helps kids learn to be responsible with something you've given them. I tend to believe, so we've got a large sample size of children, and so I don't think that works with every kid. I think that I have kids that any amount of money is just burning a hole in their pocket from the moment it touches the threads. And so I don't think that giving those kids money makes them any more responsible with money. I think if there's a personality thing there. So we do give our children the opportunity to earn money, usually not with standard day-to-day chores that contribute to the running of the household. So you don't get paid for emptying the house. But I think we heard enough stories from big families early on in our marriage about older kids in big families feeling really taken advantage of for never being paid for all the babysitting they did. There was a lot of resentment there. And it made us start thinking about just what are some things that are a little bit over and above that we ask our kids to do that we could give them a way to earn money through actual hard work. I think there's a better lesson in hard work that's above and beyond just the day-to-day functioning of the house, because it feels a little bit like a job.
But so in order to earn babysitting money, I have the same expectations for our kids that I would have for an outside babysitter, which means I don't want to come home to dishes, I don't want to come home to the that you have to have been successful in your babysitting attempt. And then things like, we have sort of standing chores available if they want to earn money, like to wash the car or vacuum it out, and they almost never take advantage of it. But the opportunity is there.
On the babysitting thing, we do have kind of an informal report card system on the big kids and the little kids, where they kind of can grade each other. So the big kids can tell, and everybody in the house can earn points.
Yeah, you can get paid for being successfully babysat.
Yeah. So the big kids give a report on the little kids that say they were a real problem. Then the little kids don't get their reduced amount of money that they would get for being babysat well. We also have a rule that's up on this board that says tyranny will not be tolerated. It sounds like our last name, but tyranny will not be tolerated. And so we have, this is the rule that moderates the authority that we give to our big kids. So we give them a lot of authority over the little kids in our house. And what we tell
Little kids
Yeah.
do what?
little kids
do what they can tell them.
Little kids do what big kids tell them. That's another rule. So tyranny will not be tolerated is the sort of counterpart to that rule. What I tell little kids who have a dispute with an older sibling is you do what the big kid says unless it's dangerous or destructive. And if you really feel unfairly treated and you have the courage to come and talk to me about it, then I will listen to what you say. So sometimes little kids will come and say, this older brother or sister was really, to put it in my own words, was really a tyrant last night. And so we'll go and we'll get a little bit of information from him to find out if we think that that's true, and then that older kid might not earn their babysitting money for the night if they were really a tyrant for the night. Yes, this is Green.
I'm on board with all of this. Pretty much what we do. But one question I have is, one of the last things you said was about your kids not finding you a hypocrite when you're following through on things and building virtue in your own self, right? So there's so many things that I'm like, oh, if I'd only done this earlier in life. So I try and build those virtues in them, and half the time I'm also trying to build those same things in myself because I was not taught that when I was younger. So do you have any of those things or anything, any advice?
Yeah, so the issue of if we're trying to instill virtue in our kids while we're still growing in virtue ourselves. And I think that that's an important difference between this parenting with authority and a more authoritarian approach. Because when we look at authority, Jesus was subject to his parents not because they were better than he was, because they weren't, right? But just because they were in a position of authority over him. And so rather than holding yourself up as, I am always right, I always know the right answer, and so you should listen to me. No, you have to listen to me because God made me your mom, and I'm going to make mistakes. I'm not going to be perfect at this. And I'm trying to grow in virtue just the same way you are, is I think a much more honest approach and a good way to not get knocked off of a pedestal ever. I don't want to, I'm not trying to set myself up as a perfect human being to my kids because I will only disappoint them. So they have to listen to me, even though I am an imperfect person, even though I'm going to fail at my goals, often, and I'm going to go to them and I'm going to apologize, and I'm going to say, I blew it, I'm sorry I brought up things from other fights when we were having this discussion. I'm sorry that, I'm sorry I yelled because I was late, and didn't give you enough time to find your shoes, even though we do have a rule about where shoes should be. But I think that just that seeing authority as something that comes from God that we're both just stuck with. you know? And it isn't just, I think, that it's a healthier way to see that relationship, and it allows for growth on both sides.
Right, painting yourself as more, I'm human too, I'm gonna make mistakes, being humble about it, I guess.
Yes, yes, I think that's true, that having that humility but still authority, still saying, even though I'm gonna make mistakes, you still have to listen to me because we have to listen to somebody, and it's just gonna be me, right? I don't know, do you have anything to add?
No, I was going to focus on
Sometimes it could be you.
the apology thing. Apologizing to a child is incredibly powerful and I think memorable action to take. And also, if our kids see us going to confession, that we're acknowledging that we're imperfect human beings. They might not get that when they're young, but if they think back and have a memory of, wow, mom and dad, boy, they sure went to confession a lot. And here I am with my own first 2 children and finding myself feeling like I need to go to confession a lot. I'm kind of putting 2 and 2 together. So, anyway. Court.
How long do you feel like it took you in your family's journey, to have the structure that you felt kind of comfortable with? How old was your oldest when you felt like you kind of had things sort of, at least a plan to follow?
So the question is, how long did it take us to feel like we were settled into our system and we had a plan to follow?
Oh, well, so I would say that, honestly, looking back, I am grateful that I had a really challenging kid for my first, because then the next couple were so much easier in comparison. But I would say that it was, I didn't really feel like until our 4th was born that I felt confident in the rules that we had set and in sort of our parenting style, and that I think that's about when you get to your 10,000 hours of parenting. You count it up, and so that's when you're officially an expert, and that the things that my kids do and still do stop surprising and offending me so much, because I just realized that this is pretty standard, and it's not, even though they are actually doing it at me, it's not my fault necessarily. And so it definitely was multiple kids in before I really felt confident in exerting authority and confident that I knew what I was doing as a mom. But yeah, my oldest was very humbling, because I had read all of the parenting books while I was pregnant with him, so I knew that exactly what I was going to do, and exactly and exactly how he was going to respond to that, and then he didn't do any of the things that he was going to do, even though I was doing it just right. But again, it was an excellent, I think, trial by fire for me anyway. But I don't know, when did we figure it out? We're still working on it.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like it's all yet to prove out. We don't have our first out of the house yet. I think we were comfortable with authority just going into marriage and in our own family, but it reflects our own upbringing. And so we definitely had parents that exercised authority. And so, I think it just was the trial and error of what the rules were that were for our particular kids and our particular family culture. So I think that it did take several kids, maybe 3 or 4, to settle into it before we felt like we had hit a stride with a family system that we were committed to, and we knew it was going to work well for our kids.
And I would say, but then we had our 6th, who And just when I was like, oh yeah, I know what I'm doing now. That went too long.
So it's, I'm noticing that it's 8:30 and I see a lot of hands up. If it's time to stop, we can stick around and answer more questions individually. Do you think we should hand off the mic?
Yeah, I think that's fine. I just want to respond to one thing Jim said. He said their system has yet to prove out. I beg to differ with him. I'm the scoutmaster of the oldest four boys in that picture there. And the Tierney boys are a delight to work with. Sometimes they have to be corrected or reminded, but they are respectful of authority. And that is a really standout thing. They're also fun, they're funny, they're lively, they're great leaders, so you guys are doing a great job. And then one last thing too, it's kind of implicit here, they didn't make it explicit, but as you can see there, they have a large family, and some of us come from backgrounds, as I did, where you look at something like that and you get a big gulp, and you think, no way I could ever do that. And that's sort of what I thought as well. And some of us, especially who are converts to the Catholic faith, thought that Catholic teaching against artificial birth control was just crazy. But I think you can kind of see here the evidence, and others of there's so many families in our school that have taught us that a large family is well worth the challenge and the courage it takes. And in fact, in response to one question that one of the parents asked, how do you impart in your children a virtue that you don't have yourself? And my answer to that would be, have a large family. Because as one great saint said, a large family is a natural school of virtue. You may not be naturally cheerful. You may not have natural fortitude. You may not be someone who naturally wants to share things. But in a large family, children learn those things just by being in the environment they're in. So for those who might be looking at this and kind of looking with a little bit of trepidation or skepticism as a convert to the large family situation, I wholeheartedly recommend it, and you can see just how great it's worked out for the Tierney. So thank you again for being here.